Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this second training of the ATHENA project. So I'm really glad to see all of you for this second part of our training. Today, I will make a presentation on the ATHENA project and the approach that we adopt in the project for the development and implementation of the gender equality plans. And following my presentation, I have the pleasure to introduce you to Ana Belén Amil from the Central European University. She's the Gender Equality Officer of the Central European University for another European funded project, which is the Supera project. And she has also developed trainings and for another funded project, European funded project, which is the Gender Equality Academy. And following Anna's presentation, we will count with another expert, who is Sara Aguirre Sanchez Beato from the Université Libre de Bruxelles. She's also a gender and diversity expert, and she currently works as postdoc researcher and project manager at the Caliper project, which is another European funded project. So I will share my screen to start with my presentation. I suppose you see well my screen. So in case not, please just give me a sign. Okay. So many of you might not know the project. We have some of the partner representative as members of our gender equality plans implementation committee, but for some of you, ATHENA might be a new project. So this is why I would like to quickly introduce you what is ATHENA and what is the concept in which we will work to pursue gender equality, and in particular, which European policies and initiatives for institutional change in research organization we will refer to. And the last point, the most important probably, is how we envisage to develop the gender equality plans in all the research performing and research funding organizations of our project. So ATHENA is an Horizon 2020 project. We started our activities on 1st of February 2021, and the project will last for 4 years. And the overall budget we received for these activities is €1,828,000. And the objective of the project is to support the 6 research performing organizations and the 2 research funding organizations in developing and implementing gender equality plans that will generate systemic institutional changes. So this is very important because even if the concrete measurable results will be the development and implementation of the equality plans, we on the other side aim at really generating a change in the institutions, in your institutions, and in the overall context surrounding your institution. So you see here our consortium, ATHENA, has always been conceived as a project that targets the most needed somehow areas in Europe, which are those that register the lowest gender equality indexes in Europe, at least when we developed the proposal. And you see here in the consortium that the partners participating are actually either from Central Eastern Europe countries or from outermost regions territories. And this is interesting because these are now the countries that are eligible for the widening program in Horizon Europe. So you see here the list of partners. We at Consulta Europa are coordinating the project. Then we have the Joseph Stefan Institute, then Jan Kochanowski University in Kilce, University of Bucharest, the University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria. Then we have the National Research Council in Italy, which is actually not working as research performing organization, but is rather working as a external evaluator and responsible for monitoring and impact assessment. And then we have the Institute of Social Science, of Social Communication in the Academy of Science, University of Ruse, Angel Kanchev, and then we have the two research funding organizations. So, Agencia Canaria de Investigación, Innovación y Sociedad de la Información, so the Canary Agency for Research, Innovation and Information Society, and in Portugal, the Regional Fund for Science and Technology. So you see, we are 10 partners, for which we have 6 research performing organizations and 2 research funding organizations, which will develop and implement the gender equality plans. You see here the framework of the project. So the idea when we developed ATHENA was that, of course, we do not have to start from scratch, because there is a lot of work already done by the European institutions, but also by other European projects and by other organizations in Europe. So you see here that we can rely on a series of sources and expertise outside the project, which are at first instance the European Institute for Gender Equality GEAR tool, which has developed, which is really a tool that can guide us in the development and implementation of the plans. I really recommend that you visit the European Institute for Gender Equality webpage, where you will see a lot of resources. In our website, in the ATHENA website, we have already linked many of those resources, so you can also access those through our project website. But indeed, their GEAR tool is a reference for ATHENA. On the other side, we have constituted an advisory board with gender experts, which includes also representative of scientific publishers. So, and the advisory board will be also a valuable tool for us to support the work that we are doing and to ensure that we are in the right direction, in the right track, and that we will achieve the impact that we expect to achieve. On the other side, here you see that we have gender experts, which are external experts that each organization of the project can contract to support the development of the training, so to deliver actually training to the members of the GP committee, and also to support you in the development and implementation of the gender equality plan. And as a matter of fact, we rely on all the work and the experience done by other sister projects, such as those that will be presented today and the other that have been presented in the first session. So in that sense, we are really making many efforts to establish synergies with those projects so that we capitalize on their experience and on their lessons learned. So this is what we rely upon outside the project. But then when it comes to the consortium and to our partner, in each organization, in each research performing and research funding organization, we have established contact, and you actually, your partner, have established contact and have engaged representatives from of staff from your organization, which, where possible, represent the different staff categories that are needed for to really engage in the institutional change and develop the plan. As we were saying in the previous training, the gender equality plan must be the result of both a bottom-up and a top-down approach. So for the bottom-up approach, we need really to involve all representatives of staff categories such as administrative staff, human resource professional, researchers and professors. And where possible, this was not compulsory, but we recommend our partners to do it, involve also your students. This is needed to ensure that all the people working at your organization will really adopt and understand the need for gender equality and adopt the gender equality and the ATHENA principle. And in this way, if they feel that they feel knowledgeable, they feel they are aware, they will feel empowered to promote the change, and so not only receive it as an imposition from outside. On the other side, since we need to have institutional endorsement of the project, we talk about a top-down approach. And in that sense, we said in the previous training that the involvement, the engagement of the high and middle management is fundamental. And we have already this engagement ensured in the project, since in most cases rectors and vice rectors have submitted a letter of commitment when we develop the project. But it is very important that this commitment stay throughout the whole process of the development and implementation of the gender equality plans. So all these staff category, all the members, representatives of these staff categories are those that are actually composing the GP committee in your organization, and will be those that will be responsible for developing and delivering and implementing the gender equality plan. So you see here that we have a GP committee in each organization, in each of the research funding and research performing organization. And you see here the structure of the work plan. So how we structure our work in these 4 years activities. So the first part of the work has been and is currently ongoing, a gender audit and assessment of the procedures and practices in place at each organization and at the national level. So we made really a thorough analysis of gender disaggregated data and also of national legislation and national policies. And also, as we will see, we are in the process of performing another type of more qualitative analysis to assess obstacles that can hamper the implementation of the gender equality plan. So work package 2 has been creating the knowledge basis for upon which we will develop the gender equality plan. And this work, this building of the knowledge basis, goes along with another important activity, which is ensuring that the members of the GP committee and the staff at the partnering organization have the capacity to generate a systemic institutional change and then to develop the gender equality plan, of course. So work package 2 and 3 somehow run in parallel, and I can say that we are in the middle of work package 3 because this training is one of the expected results of work package 3. And you will see that the capacity building activity included also a training at your organization, so at your premises, in your national languages, with the support of the gender experts that we mentioned before. So following this first part of preparation, I would say, then we have work package 4, which deal with the development and implementation of the gender equality plan. Work package 5 has to see with monitoring and evaluating, so monitoring the implementation of the gender equality plan and evaluating the results achieved and the impact achieved. And then we have a work package 6, which is about developing a sustainability strategy to ensure the replication of the gender equality plans and of the project approach and the project objectives. Sustainability is a key word in ATHENA. We will come back on this concept, because the point is not only about developing the plans and implement those, but it's really about embedding all the measures and activities foreseen in the plans in the everyday routine of your organization, and also to generate really a change of mentality in the staff and in the students of your organization. We have then 2 horizontal work packages, which are, of course, the work package 1 on management and coordination, and work package 7 on dissemination and communication activities. So let's go a bit more into the detail of work package 2 activities. We had like 3 main activities or aims in our work package 2. The first one was to perform qualitative and quantitative gender audits. Then we wanted to assess existing national provisions in each country. And the third objective and main group of activity has to see with identifying existing gender bias in our organization. So the first activity, the first group of activity, which has really represented an important bulk of work for ATHENA, has been the development of a database for gender equality audit, which is a deliverable of the project, and which is developed around 6 dimensions. So for this database, gender disaggregated data have been collected to receive information and have a picture of what is the situation in each ATHENA organization, in each partner, with respect to the number of graduate people, with the respect to the participants of women and men in research, so with respect to gender balance in research. Also, the third dimension has to see with gender balance in career advancement. So with respect to achieving a certain type of positions within an organization. The fourth dimension is about decision making. So gender balance or gender representativeness in a top leading position, in decision making position in each organization. The fifth dimension has to see with the working conditions in the research funding and research performing organization. And the sixth dimension has to see with research outputs. We have seen actually in the previous training that all these fields, all these contexts are equally important for gender equality. So we discussed, for instance, about the glass ceiling and the difficulty that still women have to face with to achieve top leading position. But we saw also, for instance, the differences in accessing research funding, and for instance, in participating in research research proposal development, and in accessing, for instance, funding under these sources. The second group of activity in Work Package 2 has to see with the national state of the art in terms of legislation, in terms of national provisions, rules, and procedure. So deliverable 2.2 is a report on national status in gender equality in each partner country. And it's really a very exhaustive assessment of how gender equality is addressed and is ruled in each organization. So you will see in this deliverable, all the deliverables are of course accessible. And I invite you to go through those. In some cases, it's really a lot of text work, but I really invite you at least to go through to the conclusion and try to see what type of work has been done. In this case, this report is structured in 4 sections. The first section provides you with an overview on the international and European Union commitments for gender equality in society, and then specifically in the framework of research and innovation. We have seen actually those during the previous training, but if you would like to have more information, you can access this in this deliverable. Then the second section is a description of the status quo of gender equality in the partner countries. So as describes what is the national provision in general in each organization, and tried also to identify main gaps or shortcomings or like good practices. The third point is about the status quo of gender equality, in particular in research and innovation. And so the report addressed the existence of specific provision or the lack of existing provisions. And then the fourth point is about conclusions and also some recommendations specific for each ATHENA country. So I don't want to lose too much time, but I think it was interesting for this training to highlight the main conclusion that you will find in the report for each country. So you see here the list of countries. So for Bulgaria, for instance, the main conclusion stated that Bulgaria officially supports the implementation of the gender equality strategy proposed and adopted by the European Commission, and that there is clear evidence that also the institution in Bulgaria are adopting and encouraging behavior towards the goal of gender equality. When it comes to Spain, there is a legal framework that incorporates the right of equality between women and men. And then at national level, there are different strategies, programs, and action plans that have been implemented. And also a strategic group of gender equality has been established at the national level. And an important maybe issue, or the most important issue according to the report, is the gender pay gap, in particular in research between men and women, when it needs possibly to be addressed with more strength. When it comes to Poland, conclusion stated that the accession to the EU has actually contributed to general improvement of the national legal framework for gender equality, but that institutional mechanism for gender equality and gender mainstreaming still are an issue that should be addressed for at policy level. So how to establish such institutional mechanism for gender equality and gender mainstreaming. In this case, for instance, in Poland, one of the biggest challenges that has been identified is the elimination of sexual harassment. And also that still there is a need for more gender awareness in research institutions across the countries, gender awareness about gender equality and gender equal opportunities, in particular for science and research. When we move now to Portugal, where the conclusion was that the European national and regional legal political framework promotes gender equality in each organization, so at the organizational level, but that the mechanism for technical support and for the control of the implementation of those policies is still incipient, so still has to develop. So there is a legal framework in place, but mechanism to ensure that this legal framework is actually implemented and respected are still very young. Concerning Romania, also gender equality has been adopted at political level, but there is a lack of culture of evidence, which makes difficult the design and implementation of specific policies in different areas. So gender policies in specific areas. At the moment, there is no integrative operational gender sensitive approach for educational policies at all, for instance. When it comes to Slovenia, the primary legislation of gender equality is disclosed in the Equal Opportunities for Women and Men Act, and this act defines general and special measures for the creation of equal opportunities. So again, there is a legislative framework in place, but the relationship between gender equality and science education is currently not balanced, and there are different types of gender inequalities that have been spotted and highlighted. Nonetheless, there is under the ministry a specific commission for equal opportunities in science, which has been created and which is promoting this change and somehow trying to filling up the gaps that have been highlighted. And then for Slovakia, The promotion of gender equality in most societal area is already backed by national strategies and action equality plans. But despite of this, based on specific gender equality indicators, it seems that the unequal and gender imbalance situation has not improved, but on the other side has even worsened. And maybe this is also due to the fact that there is really low commitment for gender equality in research and innovation among higher education institutions, among universities. So you see here really a short conclusion for each country. I invite you, before you start working at the development of the gender equality plan, to go through the report and read what is the situation in your country, because of course this will have an impact on how the measure, for instance, that you will include in the gender equality plan. There might be some measures which are compulsory, but there might be some measures which are not foreseen as compulsory, for instance, at national level. And in this sense, you can really promote this culture change and promote good practices that could be inspiring for also not only for your organization, but for your country. And this is important in particular since as we will come to this point, but in Horizon Europe, gender equality plans are now a compulsory condition to participate, to access the program. And this is really a good signal from the European Commission and a concrete element that you can use to further promote gender equality in your organization. Okay, still staying with the Work Package 2 activities, we have some activities that have not been completed yet. We are in the process of finalizing those. And those have to see with the identification of gender bias in your organization. And to identify those gender bias, we have foreseen 3 types of activities in ATHENA. The first one is the performing of a survey among your staff to identify the bias. But then we also would like to have more live information, more experiences really from people, from the organization, from the staff. And so we have foreseen 2 types of activities. The first one are storytelling interviews, so in which we will ask specific people in each organization to describe their experience with gender bias and with the specific practices in your organizations that might not be, but that might not promote gender equality, but do the opposite. And then the third activity are focus groups. So we will put together a few people to have the opportunity to exchange views among the different representatives of different staff category about those experiences, and so be able to have not only individual stories, but also sharing of those stories, and be able to collectively identify gender bias. So I connect now to what we were saying before about the compulsory condition of having a gender equality plan to access Horizon Europe. In the first training, we have seen the whole story of how gender equality has been tackled since the establishment of the European Union with the Treaty of Rome until now with the Horizon Europe program. So you see that the gender equality plans is an eligibility criterion now, and this is actually the result of this change of approach in addressing gender equality. So if at the beginning the European Union addressed gender equality as an issue of how to promote participation of women in science, and we call that the fixing women approach, we moved more recently in the last 20 years, I would say, to the fixing organization approach. So there was a general acknowledgement that the problem was not about with promoting the participation of women, but to really generating structural change in the organization, in the mentality of the organization, the approach of the organization towards gender equality. So this overall evolution has led to the introduction now of this criterion, eligibility criterion of gender equality plans in Horizon Europe. And so staying in the framework of the European policies and initiatives for institutional change, the last conclusion of the European Council on advancing gender equality in the European research area called indeed for these cultural and institutional changes to address gender imbalances in research institutions and in decision-making bodies. So the European Union is really striving to support and promote this change. ATHENA is an example of these efforts that the European Union is doing to promote those institutional change, because we are one of the projects, along with many other sister projects that are supported and receive funds to develop and implement gender equality plans. So the eligibility criterion that many organizations has now to comply with is to have this gender equality plan in place already. And the gender equality plan include specific section that has to be in the plan, and also have to be developed fulfilling certain process related requirements. So for a gender equality plans to be actually fulfilled as eligibility criterion within Horizon Europe, you have to conduct an impact assessment and audit of procedures and practices to identify gender bias prior to the development of the plan, and then identify and implement strategies or measures to correct those bias. And then you have also to set targets and monitor progress of achieved through the implementation of the gender equality plans. So for an organization that willing to access Horizon Europe that has not yet a gender equality plans, that organization will have to follow this step, which are compulsory, in order for the gender equality plans to be considered actually achieved and respond to the eligibility criterion of the Commission. And these are indeed the steps that we have already foreseen in ATHENA. So the gender equality plans that we will develop in ATHENA, of course, are in line with the European Commission and the Horizon Europe requirement for accessing Horizon Europe funds. The guidelines provided by the European Commission in this sense have thus identified 4 phases for the development and implementation of the gender equality plan. The first phases start with this analysis that we have already mentioned in the previous training, which has to see with collecting sex disaggregated data. If we do not have this data, we do not really have a concrete and real picture of what is the status of gender equality in our organization. So this is the work that has been done, for instance, in ATHENA for our partners under Work Package 2. And then another type of assessment is about procedures, processes, and practices. So it is very important also to understand what are, for instance, different procedures in place in your organization concerning recruitment, concerning career advancement, but also concerning distribution of work. We saw, for instance, in the previous training that very often it has been observed that in research organization, women are somehow encouraged to take more the work of assisting students and rather than performing research. So it is very important that in your organization you are aware of what are the procedures and the processes or the practices in place, so that you will be able to identify if actually those practices promote gender balance, or if there are some gender bias that you are not aware of that are promoting gender imbalances on the other side. Then the second phase is the planning phase. So in this phase, what we have to do is to define what are our objectives. So based on the sex disaggregated data, based on the gender audit that has been performed in your organization, you will be able to set objectives, which have to be ambitious, but also realistic and possibly smart objectives, so that can be measurable also, because those you will need then to be able to measure the results you have achieved and also the degree of achievement of your objectives. Then once you have defined the objectives in the planning phase, you will have to take decision on what are the actions and measures that you want to adopt in your organization based on the analysis that have been performed. So we do not expect to have equal gender equality plans across all partner organizations. You can and you should actually develop a gender equality plan that respond to the specific needs of your organization. Then the third point in planning is defining which are the resources that you can allocate for the development and implementation of the plan. This is an important part. So ensure that you have sufficient human resources and in some cases financial resources for the development of the plans, and then define responsibilities. So define who is responsible for formally adopting the plan and then for the implementation. And it is important that those responsibilities do not fall only under the high management or the administrative departments, but that you really distribute those across the organization. And of course, last but not least, you will have to make a kind of timeline, so a kind of calendar of activity to ensure that you will achieve those activities in a given time framework. As a matter of fact, we have already a timeline in ATHENA that we have to comply with, but it would be good that also for you make an internal calendar. Then, when it comes to the implementation of the gender equality plan has not only to see with implementing activities. As I said before, we aim at achieving institutional change and cultural change. And to do that, while you are implementing the gender equality plan, you want to expand the network of stakeholders. You want to engage more what we called in the previous training agents of change. So the bigger is the network of people involved in our organization, and possibly also of people engaged from outside the organization, the bigger will be the impact of the gender equality plan. And so the more people we engage, more we have maximized our effort. So we move now to the part of the monitoring, which has equal importance as the other part, because if we do not measure it and we are not able to demonstrate that we have achieved results and we have achieved impact, again, our efforts will lose somehow value. So monitoring has to see with follow-up and assessment of the process, so of the implementation, but also of the progress achieved. So the results we have achieved, and in particular with respect to the initial situation that was described under the analysis phase. And it is important that we are able to continuously monitor the process, the implementation of the gender equality plans, because also this monitoring will give us information, very valuable information to modify, for instance, the gender equality plans, to adjust it and to improve it. Because maybe during the monitoring, we will realize that the measure as we have conceived it at the beginning is not that much effective and needs to be adjusted, need to be modified. So it is very important that while we implement the action, we will always have a look at how the implementation is going and if we are actually achieving the results that we expect. So key aspects for the the development of the gender equality plans. At the beginning, it's very important the context. So as I said before, identify action that would work best in your institution, in according with the objective of your institution, but also in according with the national and regional context in your country or in your region. And then the second point why we will approach the development of the gender equality plan is involve the right people. So we have already, all the organization have already identified gender experts that will be supporting, that will support the development of the and implementation of the gender equality plans. But as more experts you can involve, the more support you will receive, and the more you increase your chance of really having a successful gender equality plans which generate a true impact and a true change in your organization. Then coming to the analysis, we have already seen this. The data broken by sex are needed to detect any gender differences and identify areas which requires more strongly an intervention. So in the report, in deliverable 2.1, you will see those data, and you will be able to see if there is a specific areas which need more intervention rather than another one. So we really invite you to shape your gender equality plan based on this sex disaggregated data. And in this way, try to be identify potential measure that will answer those gaps that you have identified through the sex disaggregated data. And eventually, if there are already existing measures in place, you can consider those and try to, the point is not about erasing what has already been done in your organization, but try also to assess if what is in place is working, is functioning, can be replicated, can be continued, or if it can be adjusted and improved. Then if there are no measure in place in your organization, or you have no many ideas, we know that some members of the GP committee are really quite new to this topic of gender equality. And so we do not expect all of you to be knowledgeable about gender equality and to know which measures you would like to implement. So there is a lot of work done by other partners, by other organizations, by other projects. So you can really get inspiration by their experience, and you can adapt the measure, for instance, that other organizations have implemented and their premises in your specific context, in your specific organization. In our website, in the ATHENA website, we have already collected the list of all our sister projects with references to what they have done. So if you check our project website, you will access all this pool of knowledge and experience of other projects. When we define then in the planning activities, when you define your objective, as I said before, try to define SMART objectives, and which are specific, which are measurable, which are attainable, so achievable, realistic, and time related. So try to define objectives that you can really, that you can achieve, even if they are ambitious, that are very specific, because then if they are specific, you can also measure the degree of achievement and the results achieved. Then define a realistic timeline for the implementation of the measures of your gender equality plans, and promote participations of actors at all levels. So we really recommend, and this is the approach that we already have adopted in ATHENA, that you also adopt a participatory approach, so that you try to think of involving as many people as possible and try to disseminate the work that you are doing and that you will be doing among a wide range of people. And this should happen across the whole process. So we said during the first training that communication is fundamental. We really need to communicate the need for a change to people, make people understand why this need for change is needed, because we want people to become active agents of change and not to feel that they are obliged to pursue a change that they do not really understand or they do not really share. So it is very important, this issue of communication and participation at all levels. Again, with the planning, set clear responsibilities for each measure. So apart from having responsibilities set at institutional level, for each measure that you will implement, it would be good if you identify one person responsible for that measure that will be responsible for the implementation, but also collecting data. And that will be the person that will be able to report to the whole committee about how the measure implementation is going on. Build alliances, so try to build alliances with other people in your organization, and if possible, why not with external organization, other regional authority, local authority, but also businesses, civil society organization. So try to be reinforced with the support of other organizations. And consider sustainability. So the point of sustainability is important because we want a gender equality plans that we want not to need a gender equality plans in the coming years. So the point is that we want that the practices that we will foresee in the plans will be mainstream in the everyday practices in your organization, and what now is considered as special as part of a plan, the day tomorrow will be normal routines in your organization and part of normal policies and procedures in your organization. So try to embed and institutionalize as many action measures as possible. So try to ensure that those measures will be then mainstream. For instance, that if you adopt a recruitment measure, try to make sure that then that measure, that objective, that targets that you might have stated will be mainstream in the recruitment procedures or policies in the coming years. Organize regular meetings. So it is important that you always meet and talk on a regular basis to discuss progress, the achievements that you have observed or measures, and aspects that can be improved. These meetings, since we expect that each person might be responsible of a different measure, are fundamental to share information to see how things are going. And also, I would say, following the recommendations of one of our experts of the last training, it is also very important for you to create really a team and feel reinforce one another in this process of promoting such a change in your organization. So when you plan meetings, try to involve the representatives of the different staff categories that we've seen before: high management, human resources staff, researchers and professors, administrative staff, other co-workers if relevant, and of course, if you can, students. So during the implementation, it is important, you usually think about addressing problems, addressing gaps, or discussing about what has not worked and needs to be improved. But it's very important that we also reward positive results and good practices. So if there is when there is an achievement, please celebrate it internally and celebrate it also with the other stakeholders in your organizations that might not be informed about what you are doing. And if you talk already about positive results, you might engage them more. The second point is a bit following the same line. So communicate and give visibility to the gender equality plans. Then take in mind that the plans may need adaptation. When you will develop your plan in the planning phase, you do not have to think that what is planned is fixed and written in stone. This can be changed, and very likely you will need to change it, because you will see that maybe some measures do not work in that specific way, needs to be adjusted. So consider that the GEP, the Gender Equality Plan, is a dynamic document, a lively document that you can modify across the implementation process. And be prepared to face obstacles or resistances. We discuss now about the resistances. When it comes to the monitoring phase, indicators that you will define for monitoring the results of the plan should be implementation oriented. So do not foresee very abstract indicator, but more concrete one that will help you really identifying, assessing if the implementation process is going well. Yeah, when it comes to results, you will be able to use some of the indicators that have already been used for the sex disaggregated data analysis under work package 2. So the idea is really to see, we have performed that analysis to see how the situation will improve through the gender equality plans. So part of the work is already there. And also, when you do your monitoring, considering qualitative aspects. Not everything is about data. We want to achieve a cultural change, so we need to talk with people to feel, to understand, to assess if feelings, perception have changed with respect to gender equality. So in the monitoring, example of quantitative indicators: number of female and male candidates for position, number of women and men in selection panels for recruitment and promotion, horizontal sex segregation in respective categories of work, number of male and female individuals targeted and reached by gender awareness raising or planned training action, gender ratios in accessing research grants, or in accessing laboratory spaces, for instance, and then, of course, gender pay gap among different categories of staffs. Other example of quantitative indicator: the uptake of gender equality objectives set by the Gender Equality Plan by different categories of stakeholders. So, do we have achieved those objectives? And maybe it's difficult to try to assess that at institutional level. Maybe it will be easier if we check, if we assess category by category. Did we achieve that for researcher? Did we achieve it for administrative staff? Did we achieve it for top leading position, and so on? So this is another type of indicator that you can consider. And then please take into account that the work does not finish once the GEP has been implemented and monitored. This is the end of this first step, but the idea is that with this work that you will have done, you have really generated a new cycle that will start and will have to go on, and which has to lead to the fact that gender equality is mainstream in your organization. Yeah, so you will have to reflect once the Gender Equality Plan has been implemented and measured, which are the further actions that you can take and you can promote. You will find obstacles. So obstacles that you will find are resistance to change. So we discussed this in the first training. We always welcome a change if we feel we have chosen that change, if we feel we are promoting that change, if we really see the benefit of changing. Otherwise, everybody, all of us, we are resistant to change, because change need effort. So you will find this resistance. You need to empower, raise awareness of among your staff of why we need such a change. And this will imply that you will need to raise awareness of people on why we need gender equality, because you will face with lack of understanding of what gender equality is, what is the gender equality plan, why do we need it, And also this has to see with the confusion sometimes that we made with the fact that there is a conviction that commitment to merit or excellence negates the need for gender equality work. So you might find yourself with people saying, yes, but if merit is the only value and should be the only value, and do not understand that there are conditions that do not allow certain people, women, but we see that has to see really with also other categories to access a certain position, for instance, based on merits. So you will have to face with these obstacles and with the general perception that gender equality work is not required. So this is an issue of cultural change that you will need to promote. On the other side, you might have more like tangible obstacle like lack of autonomy of research of in your organization, but this is something that somehow we have all faced because we have the institution endorsement for the gender equality plans. You have to ensure that you will have human and financial resources for the development and implementation of the plan. You might find yourself with still some missing data that we encourage you to try to monitor and measure if in the case. And then you might, some obstacle has to see with the fact that maybe you don't have sufficient allies in your organization. So this is why we really recommend that you spread the word, that you raise awareness among people within your organization and outside your organization. If you have allies outside your organization, it will be also easier than to implement the gender equality plan. If you're in your organization, if you have the support of the local authority, if you have the support of a civil society organization outside your university, for instance. Other obstacles have to see with the absence of historical background in gender studies within the institution and with the difficulties related to ensuring sustainability and that the resilience of gains related to gender equality. I go quickly through now the eligibility criterion of Horizon Europe because I want you all to be aware that we have this further incentive to achieve our gender equality plan, since this will be fundamental. And this can be also an element for you to convince researchers or other staff representatives at your organization on the need to develop a gender equality plan. The gender equality plan to comply with the Horizon Europe eligibility criterion must be a public document. So it must be a formal document signed by the top management, published on your institution website and disseminated throughout the institution. It has to foresee dedicated resources, for instance, some funding resources for gender equality position or teams. So you should have at least a gender officer, a gender auditor, or a gender department. So gender equality, sorry, not gender officer, but gender equality officer or auditor or department at your organization. And if possible, foresee, for instance, reserve time for other people in your organization to work on gender equality. The gender equality plan must have been based and must foresee the collection and monitoring of data, sex disaggregated data on staff across roles and leaderships, and you must annually monitor those data and, of course, update those. And then it must foresee training and capacity building activities that tackle the whole organization and that tackle, for instance, gender biases of people, decision-making procedure, and so on. So all these steps are actually already foreseen in ATHENA. So the process that we are adopting is in line with this criterion of Horizon Europe. And then you see here also recommendation about specific GEP content areas, which are considered essential for gender equality in research and innovation. So this might be area that you want to address in your gender equality plans. The first is about work-life balance and organizational culture. The second is about gender balance in leadership and decision-making. The third one is about recruitment and career progression. Then the fourth is about integrating the gender dimension into research and teaching content. And the last one is about foreseen measures against gender-based violence, including sexual harassment. So these are recommended area to be tackled with the gender equality plans. You see here, basically, the presentation is available, so I will not go into detail of each because we don't have time, but you see that for each GEP content area, so all of those areas that I just presented to you, we have like a GEP domain. So you can foresee a specific measure in different domain. The domain that you might have in your gender equality plans has to see with policy, culture management practices, professional development, raising profiles of academics, combating gender-based violence, preventing gender-based violence, culture and curriculum, gender and research content, monitoring policy and practices, and leadership and management. These are recommendations, those are not compulsory. And you see that we have already foreseen, based on the best practices that we have analyzed and other example of other gender equality plans, example of measures that you can foresee. For instance, when it comes to leadership and management, you can have gender integrated leadership program or training program for potential female leaders, or training on unconscious bias, and so on, or gender pay audit. So there will be many measures. Your gender expert will help you understanding maybe which measure is the most suitable, and then you will be able to decide altogether. You have the opportunity to decide which measures should be in place in your organization. When you will define the measures, we have foreseen a template that we would like you to use that will help you really understand, define very well the work. So you see here, for instance, for each content area that we have seen before, you can reflect, you can define the measure reflecting on issues that you want to address in particular, then defining the action, and then go more and more into the detail of the action. So planning the duration of the action, identifying the personnel responsible for that, have example of success measures, and then foreseen indicators for the impact assessment of the measure. And you will report here, for instance, problems encountered during the implementation and possible strategies that you have addressed to solve the problem. So I finish here. I'm sorry I passed my time for 5 minutes. We can have a discussion after the other presentation of our experts. I prefer that we move the discussion afterward, because I'm pretty sure that from their experience, we will learn a lot, and maybe some of the doubts that you already have will be solved by their presentation. And so I would kindly ask you to keep your questions for the end of the training, where we will be able to share doubts and vision and opinion. And I just remember that the ATHENA e-platform will host the video recording, the presentation, and you have specific training material based on your staff category. We have seen that already somebody has completed the first part of the training, so we are really happy with that. We think that it's not a lot of work, but it's very useful and can help you achieving the knowledge and competencies that you need to work well with your colleagues in the GP committee. So welcome back. We are really now eager to listen to Ana Belén Amil and to her experience with the gender equality plans. Ana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Michelle and Sira, both of you, for your invite. I'm very happy to be here. Greetings from very, very snowy Vienna today. Here to share a bit of my takeouts of our experience of designing and implementing our first gender equality plan at Central European University, which started in Budapest, and now last year we moved to Austria. So let me give you some background first. In June 2018, Central European University joined the EU-funded project Supera, which this was not the first effort of the EU towards gender equality, but before, gender equality efforts were under the umbrella of equal opportunities in a more general way. It's a 4-year project, and it showed us definitely the importance of leadership support, the importance of funding, and of partner institutions. So basically, with the European Commission funding, we opened the position of Gender Equality Officer, which is who I am. And clearly, partner institutions give a sense of accountability that we wouldn't have otherwise. So basically, the goal of Supera is to design, implement, and monitor CEU's first gender equality plan, 2019-2022. That's the period we cover. So as our first step, we started with, of course, assessing the status of gender equality/inequality in our university. This assessment was steered by the core team, so 4 of us who are the core team at CEU. And we developed indicators across the key action areas that Michelle already shared with you, so I'm not going to repeat. The important thing here is that we, of course, took the European Commission's indicators from our grant agreement, but we also designed indicators that made sense in CEU's particular context. So there was brainstorming involved in the developing of these indicators with the Gender Equality Hub, which is a new constituted body at CEU, basically an horizontal structure with representatives of many academic and administrative units of the university who are important stakeholders in gender equality mainstreaming. So it's basically probably 20-25 people getting together and discussing these indicators. And also the Equal Opportunity Committee, which is a Senate committee at CEU, which was there before Supera and had this function of a watchdog on gender equality and equal opportunities in general. This Gender Equality Hub was in charge of collecting data from different units, participating in the analysis of that data, and then providing feedback for the report. For the assessment, we use a wide range of methods. You have these here listed, and sure, we're going to share the slides with you afterwards, so I'm not going to read them out loud, but it was basically the use of statistical data for employees and students, surveys, questionnaires, interviews. We have 2 case studies. We use textual analysis for policies, keyword-based query for gender dimension in curricula, thesis, publications, and research projects, and we use qualitative analysis for communication platforms. This was took 7 months of very, very intensive work. It ended in 110 pages, very long report. Hopefully somebody read it besides me. And with an executive summary of this report, we went through each and every possible fora in the university, town hall meetings, academic forums, senior leadership team meetings, and of course, afterwards, the Senate to communicate how CEU was doing. Of course, after this assessment, then the design of a gender equality plan followed. As you might imagine, we had to identify priorities in each of these key action areas. We couldn't act on all the problems at the same time, even if we wanted to. And identifying the priorities was also a very participatory process because we want to give people and stakeholders the highest sense of ownership as possible. So we got together to discuss which problems to tackle first. And we had also the rector's direct input on what he considered to be the most important topics. And in this gender equality plan design, we went from general priorities to SMART objectives. In the gender equality plan, which is 3 years long, the document contains more general objectives, but then we have very operational yearly working plans where we listed responsibilities, we listed indicators of success, timelines, and basically what Michelle was sharing with you in the template she showed you in one of her last slides. And we try to keep as much of an intersectional approach as possible in our gender equality plan. It's not easy at all, but we did leave room for some other variables besides gender. The first step was and is, because we're still in the midst of it, the gender equality plan implementation. As you also might imagine, we have many processes running parallel, basically because processes tend to get stuck for many reasons, most of them related to resistances. So we cannot only focus on one action. So we have 4, 5, 6 of them at the same time, and when one gets stuck, we jump to the other. We are using Fab Labs very intensively for policy design. Fab Labs are basically working groups with very smart people using co-creation techniques to come up with mainly policy, but also measures of different sorts to tackle the problems that we found in our assessment. We're working basically on strengthening and expanding the network of our strategic alliances, stakeholders involvement and alliances, also not the only top down, but also bottom up, are very important for the implementation of the GEP, and trying to use windows of opportunity as much as possible. And I will say a little bit more about that later. What are the main resistances that we faced? You might encounter this as well in your work, so I wanted to share with you which one those were and are for us. The first one is resistance against the collection, accessing, and processing of personal data for both assessment and monetary purposes. So salary data is very, very difficult to access, but it's not the only data which is difficult to access. And the resistance comes in the shape of GDPR, basically GDPR constraints. It's very, very difficult to make changes in the management of data. The second resistance was against and is against incorporating a gender dimension in curricula, and it comes in the shape of arguments about academic freedom. So basically, professors are worried that now we are going to tell them what they should be teaching. The third cluster of resistances against making sexual harassment complaint mechanisms more accessible to victims. The members of our community are extremely worried about giving room to false accusations, not respecting the rights of the accused person, and an overall fear that this will turn into a witch hunt exercise on the side of the gender equality unit and gender equality efforts in general. Fourth cluster of resistances were against affirmative action in recruitment and promotion procedures. Probably this is nothing new to you, but meritocracy and excellence are generally two big arguments against any sort of affirmative action in basically positions in the university which are extremely male dominated, and also the argument of reverse discrimination. And a fifth cluster, and in a similar fashion, resistances against quotas in elected governing bodies in our university. The democratic decision-making body we have is the Senate, and we tried to pass a quota, a gender-neutral quota there, and it was rejected under the grounds of that quotas would erase or erode representativity in the elected body. And since there are so many multiple grounds of inequality besides gender, and we cannot make room for all of those in a quota, then it would be unfair to have gender as a privileged ground for inequality. And in general, resistances come in the shape of lack of time, lack of enough human resources, financial resources. Of course, we navigating our implementation under COVID and lockdown, which always come as an emergency, And other sorts of institutional priorities, the most important for us was the move from Hungary to Austria. So you might imagine how difficult it is to implement a gender equality plan in the midst of all of these emergencies. So what we've learned from our mistakes and successes, and want to pass it on to you, is always to lobby beforehand with at least some members of decision-making bodies in your university when you're trying to pass a controversial policy, a more or less controversial proposal. This we learned from some of our failures, and not to rush. So try not to rush proposals, even if you are very, very eager to see change. Take your time to lobby and to make people participate in the building of the proposal. Something that I really took a lot of advantage of is something called interest convergence. Sometimes it happens that you can create alliances with stakeholders that are not permanent, but rather they are topic-based. So this happened a lot with our trade union. We had some common interest in some topics, not necessarily in the entire gender equality plan agenda, but in some of them, some parts of it, and we could join forces with them for that specific aspect. Try to rely on the expertise of your university or your research organization for intellectual work. For example, writing policy. We have excellent policy experts in our university, and they were very glad to jump in the design. So make use of that expertise. Be attentive of changes in leadership, because they can open or close windows of opportunities. Sometimes things that got stuck with somebody in a position of power suddenly opens up again when there's a change in leadership. Very similarly to what I said in the first point, be always inclusive, because forgetting to do so or choosing not to do so will stagnate the process. And this implies a lot of patience, meaning waiting for people to reply to emails that sometimes might take months. But if you try to bypass that, then you're going to get stuck. Always communicate with the community, not only about the problems, but also about the successes and the progress that you made, because it also creates a sense of pride that helps a lot in the advancement of the plan. And ask leadership to act on reports. So you will mostly be writing a lot of reports with a lot of problems, and always try to ask whomever you're delivering this report to do something about it. Write recommendations. And if you found a unit or department who is particularly cooperative, do use that. And sometimes allies hide in the most unexpected places. At CU, it was the case with the IT department. We found out that they are splendid allies, and it took us pretty much by surprise, I might say. So now we are in very, very close cooperation with the unit to advance a lot of things that are gender equality related. So I hope I was doing well in time-wise. Also hope that you found my comments useful, and I'm sticking around, of course, for any questions you might have now or at the end of the session. Thank you very much, Michelle. Pass the word to you.
Thank you very much, Anna. It has been really, really insightful. It was the first time I heard about Living Labs for gender equality plan, so it's good. I really like the approach, and I think there are many good recommendations that we can uptake. So and thanks you also for staying in your time. So I would like now to introduce Sara Aguirre Sanchez Beato. Sara,
good morning.
I saw your video. Welcome.
Thank you.
So you should be able to share your screen.
Okay.
Time we move to Brussels.
Yes. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Wonderful.
Yes. Okay, great. So thank you and good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. And I think my presentation is also complementary to and to Anna's presentation. So I work at the Université Libre de Bruxelles in Brussels, and I'm going to talk about the design of the gender equality plan in STEM within the Caliper project. So just a brief overview of the contents of my presentation. I will start with the Caliper project and the ULB's context, and then I will talk about different key challenges that we have encountered for the design and the approval of the GEP and the opportunities and the solutions that we implemented. So just a few words about the Caliper project. It is also European Union's funded project within the Horizon 2020 program. It aims at responding to the three objectives regarding gender equality of the European research area. So gender equality in scientific careers, gender balance in decision making, and the integration of the gender dimension into research content. But the focus of the project is the STEM disciplines, so the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So I think this is a particularity of this project. And as the ATHENA project and SUPERA project, the objective is also the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of gender equality plans in each of the partners. So we are 7 RPOs and 2 RFOs. It is also a 4-year project, and we started in January 2020. So we are 1 year older than ATHENA, but also 1 year younger than SUPERA. We are really in the middle between the two of you. So you can see for ULB, the GEP was officially approved on the 30th of August of this year, and we started the implementation in September. So my presentation will focus really on the design and the approval process and not so much on the implementation, because we are still at the beginning of this phase. So also some words about ULB. So we are not a technical university. There are some partners in our consortium that are really based on, really focused on STEM. But at ULB, we have all the disciplines, but we have 2 faculties that are particularly implicated in the Caliper project, the Faculty of Sciences and the Engineering School. So our two STEM faculties. It is also important to know that we already had a diversity plan before the Caliper project that focuses on gender, age, ethnic origin, disability, and education. All the staff, so not only for the academic staff, but also for the administrative staff. And we have already we had already before the project, we had already a gender policy. The main activities started in 2015. So we have already several measures aiming at promoting gender equality in different domains. So I put the link to the ULB's charter for gender equality if anybody is interested. So this gives you the context of our GEP. So regarding the key challenges for the design and the approval, a first challenge was, as the Caliper project has a STEM focus, our challenge at ULB was to find this gender and diversity policy on the one hand, and the overall institutional structure and mechanisms, as we were going to design a GEP initially for 2 faculties. Then another key challenge, and Anna also raised this issue, has been the specific functioning and the culture of the institution. So for instance, ULB is a particularly participatory university. So the decision making is not done by some key people such as the rector, but all the decisions must be approved by different bodies. Another principle or motto of ULB is the freedom to do research. So again, this is a challenge, for instance, for the integration of gender dimension in research. It's very similar to the challenge that Anna was underlying regarding teaching. And also there's also this value of choice, which means that nothing is mandatory at ULB practically. So this is something that is very important for the GEP design, but also for the approval of the GEP. Then there are many domains of analysis and intervention. So within the Caliper project, we have 9 areas, including human resources, students, teaching, research, harassment, communication, etc. So that means that there are many university services and stakeholders to be implicated, which is quite complex. The question of intersectionality was also a challenge because during our assessment phase, we realized, or maybe we knew already, that we have very limited diversity data, especially quantitative indicators, which is difficult. Then it is an extra challenge to design intersectional actions. And then we also experienced a kind of conflict, we can call it this way, between the time frames of the project and the time frames of the institution, because within the project we had more or less, so we had 1 year for the assessment, the diagnosis, but we only had 6 months for the GEP design, and we have 2 years for the implementation. However, the institutional rhythms, we know they are different, usually slower. So this was particularly important for the design and the inclusion of structural actions within the GEP, because usually for this kind of actions that are really touching the basis of the university, norms, regulations, you need to carry out a consultation process, you need to convince, you need really to find the right arguments to talk to many people. So this was really a challenge to do this in 6 months. And also the idea was to anticipate resistances, right? And then there is also the question of sustainability, because it is, at the end, it is a 4-year project, which is quite long, but also quite short for a policy. So we were really worried about the idea of how to guarantee sustainability after the Caliper project as well. So these are issues that have been also covered by the 2 previous presentations. So what we have done, so here I'm going to talk from a very practical point of view regarding all these challenges. The first one was coherence. So we have designed this GEP for two faculties. So we followed a double strategy. On the one hand, we focus mainly on STEM-specific challenges that are not shared by all the faculties and all the disciplines. So for instance, the lack of female professors and female students is a particular problem for the STEM, whereas there are more female students in the human and social sciences, for instance. But at the same time, we decided to include pilot actions in STEM faculties that address general challenges of the university. So for instance, regarding the first strategy, we included actions to promote female STEM role models. But for the general challenges, we included a permanent poster campaign in STEM faculties to inform about the existing service protocols to deal with sexism and harassment, because this is a problem that is shared by the whole university community. These services and protocols are not known. So the idea is to start with the STEM faculties and then evaluate the action. And if it works, we will also apply it to the whole university. And of course, there are some specific STEM challenges that intimately linked to the overall institutional processes, for instance, especially in the human resources, because if we want to, for instance, implement quotas for recruitment, for the recruitment of more female STEM professors, we need also an institutional framework to be able to do this. It is not just a faculty framework. So in this sense, these pilot actions in STEM are also a leverage for change at the institutional level. And then we also seized the opportunity of the existing gender and diversity measures to improve them or to create alliances and cooperation with what exists already. Regarding the specific functioning and culture of the institution, for instance, regarding the gender dimension in research, as we don't have at ULB any official research program for gender, but this is the case also for any other topic or discipline. There are no specific programs or funding programs. We have to change the strategy and to focus on awareness raising activities. For instance, the dissemination of guides, the organization of exhibitions, etc. Then we are basing all of our actions and activities on a voluntary participation. So for instance, there are no mandatory trainings. So really the issue of awareness raising is central, because it is the only way that we have to attract people to training and activities. And then there is also the issue of the participatory decision-making process. So I know some other partners of our consortium could approve the GEP by a decree of the rector. But we knew this would not work at ULB. So we presented, on top of discussing the actions with many people and actors from the university, we also presented them at the faculty councils and at the academic council for the approval. So this seems a detail, but it is important because we were said that we had 6 months for the design of the GEP, but actually it is the design of the GEP and the approval, and sometimes the approval takes even longer. So for instance, our academic council meets once a month, so you need to plan ahead when this meeting will take place, if the GEP will be already ready by that time, what happens if the council asks you to do changes or to improve. So at ULB, it worked quite well, and we had it approved the first time we presented it to these different councils. But I know there are some partners who didn't manage to have their GEP approved yet. So this is something definitely important to consider. Regarding the diversity and the number of services and stakeholders implicated, we created 3 internal groups at ULB. Some other partners only have 1 group, but we identified different tasks within the project and the design of the GEP. So we decided to have these 3 groups. The first one deals with project management and GEP drafting, and it is a small team to coordinate and manage the whole process, including 1 person working full-time with an overall vision, because in other partners decided to have different people working part-time, and some people left, but you lose sight of the complexity of the whole process. So in our experience, it is good to have at least 1 person who has this overall vision. But then we also created 1 enlarged group with key university stakeholders. So you can see on the right the names and the title of these people. And these are people who have a very good knowledge of the institution, who have a key role in decision making, although of course it is at the end a participatory process, and who have also the possibility to have access to different departments and services. So people who can open the door to different services and other actors. And then we also have established a working group to work on contents. They helped us a lot during the analysis phase, and we implicated directly people from the STEM faculties. So not only high and middle management, but people who have these everyday life experiences. And we also have an external group which offers us legitimacy and visibility. So to implicate as many actors and actresses as possible beyond middle and high management, we organize thematic workshops with the ULB members and also with external stakeholders. And we also had different meetings and conversations with people from different services at different levels. So in total, nearly 90 people were consulted for the design. Regarding intersectionality, instead of considering an area of the GEP, we decided to have this transversal perspective, and we tried to design all the actions in the GEP with an intersectional perspective when it was possible. Our strategy is the gender plus strategy, so gender remains the main variable of analysis and design for the design and the analysis. But we try to see how gender could interact with other variables when we don't have the data. So for example, we are organizing a day with Green Life for Girls, which is an NGO. We are invited 150 girls to ULB to do hands-on scientific experiences on campus. So we have included some indicators, intersectional indicators, such as the diversity of attendees. So we have set a target of at least 20% of girls coming from less advantaged areas and the diversity of role models. So even though we don't have this diversity data on the basis to be able to planify the action, we try to design the action in an intersectional way and to include intersectional indicators as well. Regarding the time frame, so I talked about this conflict between the time frames of the project and the time frames of the institution. We decided to include in the GEP two types of actions. The first one are actions focusing on awareness raising, training, and information. So these are usually punctual actions carried out in the short term. There is usually less resistance to these actions because they are seen as less transformative. So for instance, the organization of events, the inclusion of the dissemination of guidelines or informative actions, nobody is against this kind of actions. We also included some actions focusing on the modification of structure, mechanisms, and norms. So structural actions to be carried out in the long term, and we anticipated more resistance to this one, especially if we didn't carry out an appropriate consultation process. So our tip was to formulate these actions as feasibility studies, consultation processes, or proposition of standards. So this means that the action is not 100% defined in the GEP, but it is a way to start planting seeds and to prepare the ground for a structural action. So for instance, coming back to the idea of affirmative actions for academic recruitment, we didn't say we are going to establish a quota for recruitment, but we said we are going to do a feasibility study of the possibility of implementing affirmative actions. So this brings us to a process of discussion and again, a participatory process with all the university community to know how this could be done from a legal point of view, but also from an institutional point of view. So this is the way we found at ULB to deal with this time frame conflict. And then regarding sustainability, our strategy is, of course, the institutionalization. So one way to do this is we included in the GEP the creation of gender commissions in the STEM faculties. So we are, the Caliper team is delegating more and more the gender equality tasks to these gender commissions with the idea that they will remain, they will be the structure in the future to be in charge of policy. And we are also improving the gender indicators for the monitoring and evaluation of the actions in the long term, which is also important. So just to conclude, it is essential to know the formal norms, so of course the regulation, but also the informal norms. So all these aspects of the culture and the social practices of a university that are not written, not only concerning governance, but all the different aspects and areas of the GEP. It is very important to involve as many actors and actresses as possible and to be strategic and realistic regarding what can be proposed and achieved in the short term and what may require a longer time. it is very important to ground the actions in numbers and facts, so to design evidence-based actions and sounded arguments and rationales. And it is also very useful in our experience to involve external stakeholders for legitimation and visibility purposes. So I just added some links and resources in the presentation. I think you will receive the presentation. And that's all on my side. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Indeed, another very interesting presentation, which I think is also very useful for some of our partners, which are in the same case as you. So it's not the whole organization, but only some faculties, for instance, working. I don't want to steal time to the other participants, so and would like to open the floor for questions, comments, doubts. So please profit of the fact that we have here Anna and Sarah that can tell us more about their experience. It's always difficult to start the question. Is there no question? You can also write in the chat if you feel more comfortable. I was very impressed by, in both cases of Anna and Sarah, by the number of people that you managed to involve. I mean, either in the steering committee for Sarah and through the stakeholder involvement activities with Anna. So yeah, I wanted to ask you actually, and then I see there is Alma, a question from Alma Mele in the chat. We wanted to ask you, has it been difficult to involve people? So, or there was interest, or was like, what has been your experience? How you approach people?
In our experience, it was difficult because we did the whole assessment of the GEP online because of the lockdown. So I guess the dynamic would have been different if we could have been on site. But I think there, in my opinion, there was a lot of interest on the topic. Of course, when you do a call for participants on this kind of topic, usually people who are very motivated decide to participate, right? In my opinion, what was more tricky was regarding the expectations, because sometimes you invite people to participate, for instance, to brainstorm, and then they can be disappointed that the final actions included in the GEP don't really reflect their suggestions. So I think in all this participatory process, it is important to be very clear with the participants about this, like saying, okay, this is just brainstorming, for instance, and we will see what can be done according to our resources and other challenges and obstacles. I think this is also, yeah, it is important. But generally speaking, there is a lot of interest in participating. I think people like that.
Yeah, in our case, in Central European University, constituting the Gender Equality Hub, which is this horizontal platform of representatives from units, was very easy. But I think it has to do a lot with the profile of CEU, since it takes a lot of pride in in identifying itself with a progressive and avant-garde look and the open society values and so. And it was not at all the first effort of the university in terms of gender equality and equal opportunities in general. We already had an equal opportunity committee running. So when we started reaching out and launched the call for the hub, people really jumped quite easily and quite swiftly. It's always difficult then to maintain the commitment, but not because of lack of interest, but rather lack of time, because all of this is something that people do on top of their already overloaded work schedules. But apart from that, the level of interest was really, really high. And I'm glad to know that Sarah also mentioned something similar. I think people are quite eager to participate, and they see a lot of opportunities of actually influencing the direction that things might take. So that's always quite appealing.
Good, thanks. There is a question from one participant who she put it in the chat, Alma Mele. So it's for Anna, the question. And she said, you mentioned you receive EU funds to hire a gender equality officer. Were those funds already part of Supera, or did you receive funding applying to another project or some other funding sources?
Yeah, I respond also to the chat, but I think it was direct messaging. We use Supera money for this position. And now the challenge is whether the university will continue this position now that the Supera money is about to, so the project is coming to an end. So the big question on sustainability here is, okay, what's going to happen with the gender equality position? Thank you for the question.
Yeah. Good. Is there any other question or comment?
Yes, I have a question.
Good, Romana.
Romana Jordan from Joseph Stefan Institute. We also, I'm talking about my personal opinion that I was positively surprised how interested are people to cooperate with us with this ATHENA project. But however, there is always this decision-making process which will follow. And there could be some obstacles within it. And I noticed that Sarah mentioned that of utmost importance is appropriate consultation process. Can you maybe give us more background information about, what were good practices in your case?
Yes. So what I wanted to say is that we didn't want to include in the GEP direct measures, like especially structural measures, without really being sure that we carried out a full consultation process at the university and that we had everybody on board. So I guess there are different strategies. So maybe some universities decide to first approve the plan and to have a strong action within the plan and then deal with the resistances for the implementation. And our approach was a different one. It was more like about anticipating potential resistances. So we are aware about the debate, for instance, regarding gender quotas. So instead of including a gender quota within the GEP, we decided to formulate it as a feasibility study. So this, I think it is important because it sets already the direction. It says towards where we would like to walk without being too, obliging people or making people being compromised by the measure already. So the idea is now to take time to study how it can be done, in which circumstances, to really draw on. So we are, for instance, for this study, we are collaborating with the Equality Law Clinic of the university. So we are going to have legal experts working with us. So in order to really design the good arguments and to study the mechanisms of the institution to make a proposal that they cannot refuse. You know what I mean? This is a little bit our strategy. But at the same time, we didn't want to say, okay, gender quotas are too complicated. We just abandoned the idea. I mentioned this on the JEP. We found this middle way between including a very strong action and not including at all the action. And at the end, it can be considered a question of language, right? But language is very important. So instead of saying we're going to do this, we say we are going to study how to do this. And it worked in our place because in our case, because the GEP was approved right away, like from the first time, from the very beginning. We didn't have any comment. We had some comments about clarifications, but not really resistance to the GEP. But again, this is also, you need to know your environment and your context, and to see, because as for the Central University, ULB has a long history of social commitment, and it is in Belgium, it is seen as a very progressive university. So you really have to play also with the values of your institution. If it is more about progressive values, but it can be also about, I don't know, economic benefit, for instance, and then you will have to find arguments showing that gender equality is positive for the economy of the university, for instance, right? So you really need to know very well your institution to find the right arguments.
I totally second Sarah on that, on strategic framing, as they call it in institutional transformation. Trying to frame what you're trying to do and your objective in a way that resonates with previous values or commitments or mission of your university. And also, Sarah, as Sarah mentioned, at CU, we also follow this strategy. The things that are most controversial, instead of going right away, tackling those immediately, we formulated it as creating a working group to analyze how this could be implemented if this is something that CU would like to. So it's a way of including, but not in a very threatening manner. And it also worked. And another thing that also is working is that some things we're trying to mobilize students for them to be the stakeholders who ask for some specific changes. In our case, the curricula, we're putting together a campaign on decolonizing curricula, which of course includes the gender aspect. But it's quite easy for faculty to feel threatened by us, that we want to tell them what to teach. But if students, this is a demand coming from the students, it's much more difficult for professors to say, no, I'm not teaching this, or I'm not critically revising my syllabi. So yeah, different strategies for different objectives, and a lot of, I think, political, is a lot of sensing or testing the waters, politically speaking. I think in our kind of work, there's, yeah, I would always say 80% of our work is testing the waters and building consensus and navigating the power dynamics and the politics of the institution.
Thank you to both of you. Very useful.
Thank you very much also from my side. I do not see any other question. So I would like to thank Anna and Sarah. Anna already shared her contacts. Maybe Sarah, we can share your contacts in case anybody asks for more questions. And in any case, all the video recording is available. The presentation will be made available. So you will have access if something, you have missed some information. Thank you, Sarah. Wonderful. Thank you very much to all the assistants, to the speakers, and with our GP committee members. We will meet again soon. Thank you to everybody. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Have a nice
good luck.
weekend. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye.